Hi, welcome to Hampton Knight's webinar. Welcome to those that have joined us so far. I'm just going to give it probably 30 seconds to a minute just to allow everyone to join. We've had a great response to this webinar, so we had well over 200 people that have registered. So I'm just going to let everyone in, and then we'll start off. As you can see, today's webinar is centered around alcohol. So it's Alcohol Awareness Week this week. So we're titled the webinar's titled "Shaking Off the Stigma." So got lots of good information and lots of interesting statistics and stuff to go through. So okay, we're a minute in. I think just looking at the attendees, we've got pretty much everybody in now. So I'll kick off. So first of all, officially welcome to today's webinar. We're looking at alcohol misuse in the workplace. We've got some really good information which I'll introduce in a second. Just some general housekeeping. So in a second we'll go through the webinar and present the information to you. We are going to have a Q&A session at the end for about 15-20 minutes. There will be on your screen, you should see a Q&A button. If you click onto that, you're able to write in your question. What we'll do is we'll try and cover as many as we can. And if we run out of time, we don't get to your question, we will come back to you outside of this webinar, so you will get a response from us. Also, we are recording the webinar today, so we will be sending that out tomorrow to everybody that's registered. So if you miss something or you're interested in the information we're presenting, then we'll be sending that out to you. And then the final point, just before we get started, is at the very end we will have our contact information, so email addresses and phone numbers. So should you have any further queries, you'd like to discuss anything with us, that'll all be there. So yeah, that's all the housekeeping done. So just moving on. So as I said, lots of information to get through. In a second, I'll do a formal introduction to myself and Andy. Andy's then going to take over. He's going to go through some stats around alcohol, looking at some general stats of the UK and the impact of alcohol usage. He's then going to go into sort of what happens when we do drink alcohol, so how does it affect the body, some signs and symptoms and those kind of things. As you can see, the morning after scenario and some further information on that. The relationship between alcohol and health, so looking at both sides of that, so physical and mental health. And then some practical information around what to do if you do have an employee that has an alcohol dependency, and some of the paths that you can sort of go down to get them back into work. So they're the key headings, quite a lot of information within those. And then, as I said, the final section will be a Q&A to answer any of your questions. So quick introductions. So my name is Michael Wakeham. I'm the Client Services Director at Hampton Knight. I've worked for Hampton Knight for a number of years now, and basically oversee all our client relationships. So anything to do with delivery of service and everything along those lines. Doing the presentation today is my colleague Andy Purcell. He's our training manager at Hampton Knight. Also been with us for a number of years, and he's worked with us in a number of positions, from collection technician, trainer, and now he leads everything from a training perspective. So he manages our training department, and has got a vast array of knowledge which he's going to share with you today. So yeah, that's us. So before we get into it, for those of you that don't know Hampton Knight or have never come across us before, I'm just going to give you a very quick overview of the company and our journey to date. So as you can see, we were established in 2000, so coming up to nearly 22 years in business, and in that time we've worked with a vast array of companies across multiple sectors, different sizes, and basically offering all sorts of services around drug and alcohol testing in the workplace. So that covers everything from policy development, training, testing products, and also our 24/7 collection service as well. So doing it for a number of years, and then in 2017, we were acquired by the Medigold Health Group. Medigold Health are one of the leading occupational health providers in the UK, and the sort of joining the Medigold Health family was a great decision. A lot of synergies between the two businesses, and as you can see, it further strengthened our kind of position within the workplace in terms of a testing perspective. As everyone would know, sort of 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. As a business, Hampton Knight were able to pivot quite a lot in terms of supporting our customers with COVID testing. We were able to use our current infrastructure around collection technicians, our laboratories, and our knowledge around workplace testing. And to date, I think probably up to about a few weeks ago, we've carried out around 81,000 COVID tests in the workplace, and we continue to work with a number of companies who are doing either PCR or lateral flow testing at the moment. So going back to alcohol and drug testing, so we are at the forefront of the alcohol and drug industry in the UK from a workplace perspective, and we continue to invest very heavily in our systems, our processes, our testing equipment, just to make sure that we are delivering the right services to our customers, but also providing the right advice as well. So that's us up to date. So that's the Hampton Knight journey and a bit of background on ourselves. So I'm going to hand over now to Andy, and he's going to take things from here.
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon, all. So as Mike's introduced me, I'm Andy Purcell, I'm the training manager. So alcohol misuse. A lot of this is common sense, if you will. I like a drink as much as the next person, but it's about managing that and the sensible approach to obviously consuming of alcohol. So looking at some statistics, if you will, and some of these are quite shocking. I've got a number of documents at the side of me, which I'll refer throughout the presentation, if you will. But the government figures show that alcohol misuse is estimated to be costing the UK industry £7.3 billion a year. Now that's due to loss of productivity. So when staff, if you will, are in the workplace, they're 30% less productive. Absenteeisms, so sickness, accidents. But the whole cost to society, if you will, due to alcohol misuse is estimated to be costing the country £22.6 billion a year. Now, a lot of that's is healthcare costs, NHS costs, and then the policing, so the crime side and things like that. The figures down at the bottom there, 17 million sick days a year taken off in the UK every year due to the use of alcohol, with an estimated 200,000 people a day actually managing and struggling with the effects in the workplace. 75% of people who are seeking help for an alcohol problem are in employment, and still in 2021, all workplace accidents, if you will, involving or relate to alcohol, which for me, that page alone is quite alarming. But then we go on again, you've got the NHS part, if you will, 3.5 billion annually. Almost 1 in 5 people admit that they struggle to manage the workloads in the workplace as a result of being hungover and making mistakes. And some of these mistakes could be costly, cause injuries, fatalities, depending on what they're doing within that workplace, what their role is within that company. They could be designing plans to build a residential building or high-rise building, and it might not get noticed at the planning stage, but when that gets built, then the accidents happen. Studies show that 25,000 employees, a third, risking and exceeding their weekly alcohol guidelines, and I'll touch on the units of alcohol later. 1 in 5 drivers, nearly 7.6 million people, actually admit that they get behind the wheel of a vehicle the next day with enough alcohol in the system to fail the roadside breath test. And again, when we look at the morning after scenario, I've got stats, if you will, with regards to that. Over 75% of employees identify that alcohol is a major threat to the employee's well-being and sickness absenteeism. So what does alcohol do? Yeah. So it slows reaction times down, affects your thoughts, your coordination, and all it's doing initially is blocking the inhibitor centers within the brain. So initially it's going to cause merriment, but because it is a depressant, it's going to take you down that route. And we'll spend more time in a moment looking at this, if you will, in the chemical balance, if you will, and the effects alcohol has on the chemicals within the brain, if you will, that sends the messages around to other parts of the brain and to the rest of the body. So the unit guidelines, if you will, so alcohol consumption, which has been produced by the Chief Medical Officer, states that you risk in developing a range of health problems, cancers in the mouth, throat, breast, increases more than drinking on a regular basis. Both men and women should not drink more than 14 units of alcohol per week. Now that's changed a few years back, that was 21 units of alcohol. And the 14 units should be spread out over 3 or more days a week, rather than saving up, if you will, and consuming them over 1 or 2 days. People used to say to me, well, we don't drink on a school night, Monday to Friday, but what we do is we save our units up and we'll consume them on the Saturday. Again, people who are drinking 1 or 2 heavily episodes, if you will, each week, again, they're increasing the risk of death, long-term illnesses, accidents, injuries. So what is a unit of alcohol? The unit of alcohol is the 10 ml of pure alcohol within an alcoholic beverage. And you can see there the examples down at the bottom. So within a drink, yeah, percentage alcohol per volume. So half a pint of beer or lager at 3.5% is 1 unit of alcohol. A 25 ml glass of wine, whether white or red at 9%, is 1 unit of alcohol. And a 25 ml of spirit at 40% is 1 unit of alcohol. And I've got a list. I'll give you some other examples. So your strong lagers, if you will, your Stellas, your Peronis, your Kronenbergs, your Belgium, your German imports, if you will. We're now talking 3 to 3.5 units, 8 pints. Your bitters, 2 to 2.5 units. We look at the wine then in the middle. Yeah, it's very rare you can actually find that now on a restaurant menu, if you will, or at a bar or within a hotel. It's normally the 175 ml. A large glass of wine also 250 ml. Now we're looking at 12% volume, which is your average sort of strength, if you will, of a glass. So you're talking 2.5 units for the 175 ml and around 3 units for the 250 ml measure. So the number of units in the drinks depends on the size and the strength. So I've just gone through some of them there. The length of time it takes the body to break down a unit of alcohol differs depending on the person, because we're all completely differently. Many factors come into this equation. How good's your liver function, your age, your gender, your size, what you eat, what you drink, are all little factors that come into this equation. But it says that it takes a healthy liver 1 hour to break 1 unit of alcohol down. Excessive use of alcohol can lead to hangovers. Now, there's many cures out there for a hangover. All you need to do is hydrate your body and get your blood sugar levels back up. That's going to cure the hangover, but it's not going to get the alcohol out of your body any quicker. And like I said, it takes 1 hour to break 1 unit of alcohol down. So morning after scenario, if you will. So an employee starts drinking 8 p.m. and finishes at 11. They drink 4 pints of lager at 3.5% alcohol volume, 4 units. They have 4 whiskies at 40%, 4 units. So in total, they've consumed 12 units of alcohol. But it will take 12 hours to remove that from the system. As I mentioned, 1 hour per unit. But they're starting work at 7 a.m. the following morning. So there's 8 hours difference. But on that scenario alone, they've still got 4 units of alcohol remaining in the bloodstream when they arrive for their shift. Now, depending on what industries you're involved in, you may align yourselves to the drink drive limit. You may have more of a safety critical element to your operations. So you may have a lower limit. It could be with regards to the rail. So again, there's a lower limit. Aviation, again, there's different limits within different organisations. So it's about people being aware and being fit for when they're coming into work, not only driving on the road, but when they actually come into work. So we're talking there about your average strength lagers, if you will. Like I've just mentioned, so your Peronis, your Stellas, your things like that. So 4 pints of Peroni, say, for example, and there are obviously other alcohol available, if you will, other brands. But you're talking nearly 14 hours just to get the alcohol out of your system. So you'll see when we look at the policy element later on, it's about people being aware. It is the common sense, making sure that we are fit to carry out our duties, if you will. Well, obviously we're getting towards December. Now, I've got some stats in a moment looking at that. Obviously, we didn't really celebrate Christmas last year, if you will, company functions, things like that. But the morning after scenario offences, if you will, is almost 14% of all drink driving incidents a decade ago. But figures now are exceeding 20% according to the Department of Transport data. And over 5,500 breath tests, if you will, at the roadside by the police, found that driving under the influence of alcohol is between 6 a.m. and 12 each year in Britain. And 85,000 people were convicted for drink driving related offences every year. 3.5 million random roadside tests were carried out by the police. 90% of all drink driving accidents occur in rural areas. 90% of them accidents involving fatalities are male. And 30% of all drink driving involved in fatal accidents, the driver is aged between 17 to 24 years of age. So looking at surrounding the facts then to do with alcohol. So women, 1 in 3rd regular drink above that recommended unit, weekly units. 6% drink more than 35 units a week. Wine accounts for 60% of alcohol, all alcohol consumption. And 29 in 1,000 women are alcohol dependent. Men, 40% drink above the recommended guidelines again. 1 in 10 drink more than 50 units a week. 25% of deaths in men under 34 years of age are attributed to alcohol. And men are twice likely to drink more than women who become dependent on alcohol. So alcohol is a depressant drug, yeah? And what it does, it affects the chemical, disrupts the balance within the brain, if you will, the chemical messages that get sent around the brain. but also around the rest of the body, affecting your reaction times, your coordination, your thoughts and behaviour. And there's some symptoms there. So your spatial awareness is affected, your ability to judge distances, your reaction times, like I mentioned, your coordination, forgetfulness, your ability to follow instructions. Risk to your health, yeah. So anxiety, depression, several types of cancer. So mouth cancer, throat cancer, larynx, esophagus, liver, colon, breast cancer, your heart, so a condition called cardiomyopathy, which is a thickening of the walls to the heart, is affected by alcohol. Obviously, when we drink, yeah, higher blood pressure, brain damage, scarring to your liver tissue, weight gain. And again, looking at some stats last night and information to do with calories. So your premium lagers, if you will, and your craft beers, 12-ounce serving is between 170 to 350 calories. If you turn that into a pint, you're talking nearly 700 calories just in one pint of lager, if you will. And the wines and so on. Just want to find them on this big shocking list of all this alcohol. But white wine, 5-ounce glass, if you will, is 120 units. Now, obviously, you're drinking at home, yeah. So not only during the pandemic, 29% of people drinking more alcohol, but you're serving that yourself. So you're pouring yourself a glass of wine. Now, most wine glasses don't have a nice line on them. Now, when I do these sessions with managers and things and training managers on the alcohol, they say the rim of the glass is their line. And if you're pouring yourself a spirit, again, most people's won't have a tumbler at home, a single or double measure. So what we do is guesstimate, and we basically just pour into that glass what we think is right. So again, you're consuming more units, if you will, during that serving. You've got relationship, social problems, poor sleep. Yeah, it affects your sleep. So you don't have a good night's sleep. You get up in the morning, you're exhausted. And obviously, if you've got other conditions that we're going to be talking about in a moment, your anxiety and depression and mental health, it's going to aspirate it. But the ONS report at the bottom indicates that 7,423 people in England and Wales died from alcohol-specific causes in 2020, which is up by 20% compared to the same period in 2019. And this is the highest rate recorded since 2001. So the relationship between alcohol and mental health. Closely linked. Drinking too much can affect your well-being and aspirate the symptoms, like I mentioned, anxiety, depression. Like I said, the brain relies on a delicate balance between the chemicals and the processes. And like I said, alcohol is a depressant drug, which means it will disrupt the balance and affect the thoughts, feelings, actions, and sometimes long-term mental health. As you drink more, the impact on your brain, the function on your brain increases. Initially, it's going to give you confidence, courage, but because it is a depressant drug, it will then have a negative impact. Linked to aggression. Some people report becoming angry, anxious as they drink. people with poor mental health or severe mental illness, yeah, more likely to experience problems with drinking and developing a dependency. And they often use alcohol as self-medicate to try and cope with difficult feelings and symptoms. Now we've still got the pandemic, but the ONS reports that more and more people becoming dependent on alcohol and other illicit drugs. And what they're doing, they're using as a coping mechanism to block out other things in their life. And maybe there's been relationship issues, social issues, various lockdowns we had, couldn't cope with it. Could be financial problems and concerns because they were furloughed. They may even been made redundant, if you will, during the pandemic. Bereavements, there's been a bereavement. They've not been able to grieve properly because of the restrictions that were put in place during the lockdowns. So there's many reasons why people initially, turn to alcohol as a coping mechanism, because that's the one that's readily available, if you will, to block out, like I said, other things. So some case studies, if you will. So this is going back to the morning after scenario, and I've got a couple of examples. Factory worker, comes into work in the morning and they admit drinking. And this is where this comes in later when we talk about policy. And the company had a policy in place and procedures in place to deal with things, but the management didn't deal with it as per the company policy and procedures. And they dismissed the employee without actually doing a breath test. That employee appealed against that process. And the company had to pay, as it says there, £5,000 at that industrial tribunal. Recently, one of our collection technicians contacted myself because they've been called out to an incident where a member of staff's turned up again, started her shift, and the manager smelt alcohol on the breath. So they did the investigation, they contacted ourselves, technician went onto site, tested the employee, and both readings exceeded 200 on the breathalyzer. Like we said about the stats earlier surrounding the morning after scenario. One of the police forces, if you will, reports an 8% increase in drink driving offences. During December, as we've touched on the morning after scenario, Christmas functions, around 5,500 drivers, motorists, were caught drink driving during December, which is, we're getting to that time. Company functions, people out socialising, celebrating Christmas. It's an average of 179 people caught drink driving every day during the month of December. So how can we employees be provided with better support? Because there is a lot of stigma around alcohol. And again, just looking at that, more than 55% of all work days lost due to ill health in the past 12 months have been related to stress, dependency, anxiety. Like I said, there's still a stigma around alcohol, despite raising the awareness over the last 5 years, but there is still a stigma around mental health in the workplace. It still exists, and quite often employees are reluctant to disclose their mental health problems. to their manager or a HR or occupational health. So it's about breaking down the barriers and starting, if you will, from the senior management down, if you will, and having the discussions with the employees regarding well-being, mental health, dependency, and having the support processes in place. So it's key role within your company policy. And when I deliver these sessions to managers and review policies, it's normally within the first couple of statements, if you will, the well-being, the legislation. But also it recognises that dependency is an illness under the Equalities Act and Disabilities Act. So it's right that you get the same help and support you would do as if you were ill. If it's used correctly, it's an effective way of returning somebody to the workplace. And again, speaking to people when I do these sessions, travelling around, an employee came to me afterwards and says, I became dependent. I had a medical condition and I was on medication, but I was drinking as well because I found my body could cope with that medication and cope with that level of pain. So what I was doing, I was drinking more. It was blocking, obviously it affects the central nervous system. Through medical treatments and physio and other things, his condition got sorted out, but then he was left with his addiction, if you will, to alcohol. So with the support of his company, it took 12 months to go through a counselling programme. The aftercare programme should be supported by your HR, occupational health. However, if an employee does not want the help and support or fails to comply with the treatment offered, then yes, they may face disciplinary action. Managers, yes, you can take your concerns to the business, if you will, if you've got a concern about a serious dependency. Pass it to HR at the still earliest opportunity with any support and information. All information that you discuss with HR has to remain confidential, and HR then can explain to the employee the options that are available. We've got something what we call our PAP, signs and symptoms, so your personality, appearance and performance. So just some recognising the signs and symptoms. So your mood changes, irritable, aggressive behaviour. Reduce concern about your personal appearance. That could be completely innocent. But then if you introduce your hand tremors, confusion, your energy levels, your job performance, your timekeeping, sickness levels, your absenteeisms, always away from the place of work. And when they actually come back to their place of work, they've never actually achieved anything. Relationships with colleagues, they don't mix, socialise like they used to, if you will. They just want to isolate themselves, come into work to do the best of their abilities and then go home at the end of the day. So what can we do? It's about building a supportive culture, if you will, like I said, from management down, so people are aware of well-being, mental health within the workplace. And if they feel they've got a problem, they can come forward and discuss it. Regular communication with the employees about the support services available and keeping managers up to date. Employees who come forward and prepared to accept the help and the treatment programme should be supported rather than being dismissed. Counselling support should form part, like I said, of your drug and alcohol policy. However, should an employee fail to accept the help or support or fail to comply with the treatment offered, or likewise, if they come forward after serious misconduct's arisen or before a test is likely to take place or be proven, then they will be treated the same way as someone if they've just breached a policy. Yeah. So how would counselling work? So we recommend initial assessment with a counsellor to determine the appropriate route, if you will, for the treatments. Because everything is on a case-to-case basis, if you will. So it's for the need, it's addressing the needs of the employee. Generally recommend 6 to 8 sessions initially and regular process reports will be sent to the employee. Assurance testing may be carried out, if you will, so we'll do random testing, if you will, as part of that programme. As I mentioned, they may be able to stay in the workplace. We may have to make some adjustments to their role. Say, for example, if they're involved in a safety critical element, then we'll take that out, if you will, whilst they're going through the treatment programme. It may be that they just have to be off on the sick. And because it is an illness, then obviously the normal sick leave and absenteeism will stand. But it's anticipated that employees get the right help. The business do have a duty to look after the well-being and support them through the recovery. And obviously that's cheaper than having to recruit someone, to advertise, go through the recruitment process, the onboarding costs to a company, the training that may be involved in that role. So how can we manage the issues? Yeah, so drug and alcohol policy. Without a robust drug and alcohol and drug policy in place, legal defensibility and the action could be compromised. You saw the scenario earlier about the company having to pay £5,000. Policy should be clear, concise, robust enough to stand the scrutiny and legal defensibility. And everyone's aware of the responsibilities within. We set out a standard and requirements for the company to work to. We shouldn't be moralistic, if you will, or dictate what employees can and can't do in their own time. Because under the European Convention of Human Rights, everyone's got the right to privacy. Yeah, other legislation we need to be aware of, because it's all about safety, is the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. So Section 2 of that Act is that the company has overall duty care for everybody and everything that goes on within. But 7A and 7B is the employees themselves, that we take reasonable care for our own health and safety of others, that our actions don't cause anything. You've got the Transport and Work Act 1992, the Management of Health and Safety Work Regs of 1999, the Road Traffic Act, because we need to be aware within elements of that. Your Misuse of Drugs Act, Section 5 and Section 8 of the Act. And then you've also got Corporate Manslaughter Act of 2007. So alcohol in work, yeah, so the company encourages a sensible approach to drinking by all its employees, regardless of the role. So from your CEOs, your directors, your direct employees, your agency workers, visitors when they come onto site, have to abide by your company policy. However, the company cannot and will not accept an employee who comes into work in an impaired state due to their inappropriate alcohol consumption. Therefore, the employee should be aware of their responsibility, moderate the drinking to ensure that prior attending to work throughout their shift designated breaks, and remain within the set alcohol limits and that they are fit for duty. Since the onset of the pandemic, a third of adults are drinking increasingly or high-risk levels. During the pandemic, they say that 1 in 5, 21 adults are drinking more. People working from home, it reports again in the ONS survey, 9 out of 10 actually admitted drinking alcohol during their working day. So training and education awareness is key and should remain consistent with both managers and employees at level. Having an effective policy, it should be up to date, well defined, and like I said, stand legal defensibility. Having the right support mechanisms in place is vital elements to any workplace drug and alcohol policy. And any testing must be carried out by a certified tester using the appropriate kits in line with the European guidelines for workplace drug testing. And remember that support is just as important as protection. So how can we help you? So policy review, policy development, training managers, employees on their roles within the policy, making managers aware of signs and symptoms, things to look out for, dealing with incidents, dealing with the employees. We offer a 24/7, 365-day collection service and advice line, alcohol and drug testing products, and the counselling service. You can see there the data used to produce this presentation is sourced from the ONS, Public Health England, Drink Aware, Mind, Mental Health Charity, Alcohol Change UK, and obviously ourselves. At this point, is there any questions?
Thanks, Andy. Just had to unmute myself. Some really good information there, and I think you've covered an awful lot. I'll give you a little bit of a break before we get into the questions, but we've had some really good questions come through, and quite a few as well. So we're going to try and get through as many as we can in the next sort of 20 minutes or so. But as I said at the start, if we don't answer your particular question, we will get back to you separately. As I said, we've had quite a few, so I'm going to just start working through them and sort of put them to yourself, Andy.
Okay.
So I think the first one, which I'll just answer very quickly, actually, we've had 2 or 3 people that have just asked about the slides and the webinar itself. So just to confirm that we will be sending the recording of the webinar out tomorrow. There was quite a lot of stats on that, so obviously if you were feverishly writing them down, don't worry, they will be sent out and you can kind of go through them. So one of the key questions, or one of the questions that we've had actually a couple of times, was just around alcohol levels. Should a company, basically the question's around, should a company just follow the drink drive limit when they're sort of looking at their policy and choosing that level?
Yeah, with regards to that, a lot of companies will align themselves to the drink drive limit, depending on where they are, obviously, in the country. A lot of companies will also, depending on the roles, if you will, if they have more of a safety critical role, they may lower their limit. Like I said, rail being one that's down as 13, if you will. Aviation, 9 micrograms, if you will.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that covers that off. Just another question that's come through. Would we recommend self-testing on site, or does a certified person need to be present?
As it mentioned there towards the end, if you will, certified tested, if you will, in line with the European workplace guidelines. Technicians, our collection service, they're trained, they go through rigorous training. Because of industries that we're involved in, we refresh train them every year. They get audited as part of our accreditation, if you will, with the various bodies. We also train companies on how to use our products and do the testing. And again, all our training that we deliver is part of the CPD, Continuous Professional Development Scheme. And that's refreshed as well. So then it's going to stand scrutiny if it's ever challenged, because there's process that we follow. There's our protocol documents, which are our step-by-step guides, which our technicians use, and also our clients use, who we train to do the testing.
Excellent, thanks, Andy. We've had a couple of operational ones which I'll pick up, so you can rest your voice again. So one of the questions we've had is, how quickly can tests be arranged? So just from a Hampton Knight perspective, we have a service where we offer a 2-hour response to anywhere on the UK mainland. So basically, from the initial call, we will be to your site within that time period. As you can imagine, if there has been an incident on site or an incident or an accident, time is of the essence. So we offer that service. I think in terms of stats and how we are performing against that, we are attending around 96 to 97% of our call outs within that time frame, and I think around about 56 to 60% is actually under 90 minutes. So we have a very strong collection service and good coverage around the UK, so we can sort of meet those timescales. The other question, which I think may have been answered in your presentation, was just about the counselling side. Somebody asked, we've mentioned 12 months counselling, what's the average number of sessions? As we sort of on the sort of last couple of slides, we mentioned on average 6 to 8 sessions, but it's very much based on a case-by-case basis. Each person is very different. Each person is very different in terms of their dependency, sort of how they're recovering, how many sessions they may need. So we always have an initial counselling session, which will look at the particular case and will then advise what sort of counselling is required, and also how many sessions are required initially. But this is reviewed on an ongoing basis as well. The other question on a similar ilk was that if we had any stats on how likely it was for people to come forward with a drug or alcohol concern. I think on this we don't have specific stats on how many people come forward. We do have some stats on how many people are doing assurance testing. So just a quick one on that. Assurance testing is when somebody is who has got a dependency and is going through a kind of rehabilitation program with the company's support, and they'll be tested on a regular basis. So if you're interested in those stats, we can get those together and send them over to you. So a couple of others just to run through. So I'll aim this one at you, Andy. So how do we suggest we deal with an employee who will not admit to or acknowledge that they have an alcohol issue?
Obviously, the hardest thing for someone to do is actually admit it to themselves. First of all, they have a problem. And the first thing people see or think of when they start thinking that, yes, perhaps I do have an issue, is I'm going to lose my job. So that's why it's quite important that you have a help and support section within the policy that explains to them that if you come forward, the company will help you and support you, rather than it going down that dismissal route. It also makes them aware within that if they don't come forward and something was to happen, then there's the mechanics in place that it'd be treated the same way. But it's about the communication with yourselves as a company, about the well-being, support, like I said, the stigma around it. It's about breaking that barrier, if you will, the stigma of mental health. And it's just about having the right communication, the mental health well-being within the workplace.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy. The questions are coming in thick and fast now, so I'll try and get through all of those. But like I said, we will get back to you if we run out of time. So one of the questions has come through and has asked, is it legal to have a zero tolerance policy? I think the key thing on this one is that I suppose there's a difference between a sort of a zero tolerance and a zero level. Companies can sometimes have a zero tolerance approach, which isn't always advised because it kind of does restrict you in terms of how you can approach each case. So it is always best to have an open option in that respect. In terms of a zero level, we wouldn't recommend a zero level for alcohol. There is always the chance that somebody maybe have some medical conditions that might produce alcohol in the body naturally. The lowest sort of alcohol level in the UK workplace is for pilots, which is at 0.09. And as Andy said earlier, a lot of the levels do marry with the drink drive level, but depending on the safety critical nature of the role, some companies choose their own level, and it is risk dependent, something that's obviously your health and safety team can look at from that side, and you can agree as a business. In terms of, sorry, another question that's come through around sort of testing as well is, what if people refuse to be tested? Do we make our own judgments on what we can see and smell and behaviour? I think on this, just again, going back to the presentation and Andy's point, is that your policy is the most critical thing with drug and alcohol testing. It's very important that it lays out kind of what you're doing, the purposes of the policy, but also what to do in instances where you do have, in cases like this, where you have a kind of failure to comply or a failure to provide a sample, and what the kind of approach is from a business perspective. Most policies will have in there that if somebody fails to provide a sample or fails to comply with the process, that is deemed as a failure, and obviously that would be explained to people when you launch your policy, so all employees are aware of that. Now, there is a case where you would need to investigate it anyway, so you do need to look at the mitigation and why they did refuse, but as I said, if there's no genuine mitigation, then it can be classed, if it's in your policy, as a failure to comply and a failed test. So another question, again, more service related. Somebody's asked if our testing can be done on an ad hoc basis or it's an extra service. If you're a current customer of ours, you can sort of purchase on an ad hoc basis. You're not tied into any minimum sort of volumes of testing or how many testing you need to do, so it is paid for as you use the service. And as I said, if you want to discuss that further, please get in touch. We've got our sort of contact information there, and we can discuss that with you. Just trying to work through these. So another question here, are all drug dependencies obvious? I think just going back to the slide Andy put on in regards to alcohol and the sort of signs and symptoms, again, it's part of our awareness training as well. We do go through all the different types of drugs, so alcohol and all the various drugs, from hallucinogens, stimulants, depressants, those kind of things, and go through the signs and symptoms that you could be looking out for. They're not always necessarily obvious. It depends, you know, how you're interacting with your employees. Are you just walking past them? Are you working in the same room? You know, those kind of things. But what we found is that as you become more aware of these things, you are more likely to spot them, and it does become a little bit more obvious that you can kind of spot these signs and symptoms. So just having a look. Oh yeah, here's another question. Andy, I'll pass this one to you. So somebody said that when they've been tested at work, they actually had 2 alcohol tests. What was the reason for that?
Yeah, so we use a home office approved device, all breathalyzers, if you will, that are used, if you will, out there, certainly by ourselves, the Lion 500s, if you will, that brand. It's a home office approved device used by more or less all the police forces in the UK. We'll use that type device. We'll do the first test. So first of all, we'll ask them if they've had anything to eat or drink in 15 minutes prior to the test. That could affect the results. So basically nil by mouth. They provide that specimen of breath. If that's above 0, whether it's higher or lower than the company limit, then we repeat. The reason for repeating that test 20 minutes later is for verification purposes of that first test. For example, if the police was to arrest someone, they arrest them at the roadside, having provided that specimen of breath, they go to the police station, they go through that evidential chain. We always repeat the test 20 minutes likewise, and our machines are calibrated every 6 months, which is a requirement, which does stand legal defensibility in the employment world, if you will, as evidence of that test.
Right. Thanks, Andy. So a couple more questions, which I think we should be able to cover in the next couple of minutes. Again, Andy, I'll pass this one to you. So do we have to dismiss an employee for failing an alcohol test?
Everything is on a case-to-case basis. Yeah, how you deal with it, how you document things within a business, as long as that's transparency and the process are in place, you can deal with it as. But obviously it does say they're suspended. There's the investigation, which may include up to dismissal. So as long as this process has been followed and you're documenting it, it could be you go down the support route on that one. Because there could be many reasons why. Let's say, for example, something's happened in the early hours of the morning. They've had that dreaded knock on the door. There's no one else at home. The police have obviously left, gave them the news. They've turned to the drink, but then they're thinking, I can't cope with this now. So they go to work. They test positive on the breathalyzer, but then it comes out that they've had a bereavement in the early hours of the morning. They've not felt they could deal with it and cope with it at that time. So they wanted some sort of normality in their life, so they've come to work. On that scenario, you'd probably go very much down if you've got the EAP program in them, you're advising them obviously to contact the bereavement counselling side, and you're going to go down the more supportive route. So everything's going to be on a case-to-case basis, if you will.
Yeah, excellent. I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think, again, coming back to that is that policy and making sure that you don't have that zero tolerance, because it doesn't give you the opportunity to look into each individual case and obviously respond appropriately. But I think the other side of that is obviously making sure that your approach is consistent and it is fair and transparent for the whole workforce. So we've had a few more questions come through. I think one of them is more drug related. It talks about having a positive test on site, and then when it's sent off for further clarification, it comes back negative. Just on that, drug testing is slightly different to alcohol testing. So there is normally an instant on-site test, which gives you an indication, but then it does need to go for further clarification at a lab. And there is the chance that it could come back negative once it goes through those further tests. From an alcohol perspective, your breathalyzer, as long as it's a Home Office approved device, it's been calibrated, the result from that on site would be legally defensible. So there is no need for any further checks or sending off of the result. So probably a minute or so, we'll try and squeeze a couple more questions in. We've had one around sort of high functioning alcoholics, or functioning alcoholics, sorry. Just around if they are sort of classed as a functional alcoholic, they've got no visible symptoms in the workplace, and they appear to be working effectively. How are they best supported? I think the key thing here is that from a business perspective and a health and safety perspective, if you have an awareness that somebody is an alcoholic, they can't function without alcohol in their system, which is basically what somebody with dependency is. It needs to be addressed, because from a health and safety perspective, it is posing a risk. And if as a business you're aware of that and haven't done anything about it, and should an accident occur because of that, then obviously it's not a good situation to be in. So it does need to be addressed. And as we've gone through some of the other points around counselling, support, are the other, as Andy touched on a second ago, are there other sort of issues causing the dependency that might need to be addressed, personal matters and these kind of things, because effectively if somebody's a high functioning or a dependency on alcohol, they will be consuming alcohol all day at work. So although they may not be appearing to show any signs, they will have definite impairment at work because of this. So it definitely does need to be addressed appropriately. So we are still getting questions coming through, but I'm conscious that we've only got a minute now left of the session. So what I'm going to do is sort of thank everybody for attending. Thanks, Andy, for your presentation and your input today. Really good. And as I said, if we haven't answered your question, we will get back to everybody and come back to you shortly. Thanks very much.
Thank you.